Hello, and welcome back. So I'm going to try something a little new with these next videos. I'm going to start at the very beginning of mathematics and work my way up. Because I think a lot of people have holes in their math that are rather foundational. They have trouble with what numbers are, what fractions are, and then when you go to use these things, it can be very complicated and very confusing for some people. And math and learning math, the education of math, has a tendency to leave people behind. So I'm going to start at the very beginning and work my way all the way through all of the subjects of math, especially right now arithmetic in particular, so that I can fill in any holes of information that anybody might have. These should be more supplementary than anything. You still have to do a lot of work in between these episodes. So for example, we're going to be talking about basic numbers in this episode, and we're going to introduce a couple more numbers in the next episode. And so it's a good idea to go ahead and familiarize yourself as much as you can with these numbers before moving on to the next one. This is a very simple and very basic concept, but as we start getting into the more complicated things as time progresses, that will become even more evident. So let's get into it. So I'm going to first start by stating we can express numbers in different ways, and in particular, two different ways right now. So for example, one way that you might see numbers expressed is as words. So you might see you might see 0, 1, 2, 3. There's a lot more, but these are going to be the numbers we are talking about in this episode. And so our first way of representing numbers is with words. We can write them out with letters. And again, 0, 1, 2, 3. Now the next way that we can represent numbers is with specific symbols, which we call numbers. So for example, zero, 1, 2, 3. And that's pretty basic. And all of these numbers correspond to a value. And that's what numbers are. We are explaining the amount of something with these symbols. And that's really the basics of numbers. That's all they are. It's just some value, some quantity of something, and we express it with these symbols called numbers. And so let's talk about the different ways of writing these numbers, because there's slightly different ways that people prefer to write it. So for example, the different ways that you might see 0 written are as the different ways you might see 1 written is as the different ways you might see 2 written is as and then finally the different ways that you might see 3 written is as. Like that. And so all of these are the same thing. These are all still 0, these are all still 1, these are all still 2, and these are all still 3. It's just slightly different ways of writing those numbers. And typically it depends on preference. So do numbers have an order? And let's think about what that means. So the cool thing about numbers is that no two of them are the same. For example, our 0 and our 1 are different values. They aren't the same value. These are fixed values, and we'll go over what those values are in a second. But know that there is an order from least to greatest. You can't really say the greatest number because there's always a greater one. But we will start with 0 and we're going to introduce a lot of different numbers. So for now, 3 is our greatest number. It is bigger than 2, and it's bigger than 1, and it's bigger than 0. So what exactly is 0? Well, we can think of numbers as being a group. And if we say we have 0 items in this group, it means it's empty. There is nothing in this group at all. So for example, if we have 0 pencils, it means we don't have a pencil. If we have 0 straws, it means we don't currently have a straw. And so let's think about how much 1 is now. So again, we're going to use this group. And this group can be anything, whatever you want it to be. The number of dodgeballs you have, the number of doors you have, so many more examples. And so 1 is just 1. It means we have a singular item. For example, I have 1 pencil right now, just 1. You can have 1 eraser, you can have 1 glass, 1 friend, 1 shoe. And so we have 1 item in this group. And that group, like I said earlier, can be anything. It can be shoes, it can be TVs, it can be phones, doors, etc. And so now let's think about what 2 means. And so 2 is a pair. So for example, you have a pair of shoes. You have a pair of pencils, a pair of friends, etc. And so it means that we have 2 items in this group. You can see that if we count these dots, it's 2 dots, or 2 items, right? 1, 2, 0. And again, the group can be anything. It can be soccer balls, it can be dodgeballs, it can be wiffle bats, whatever you want it to be. The number of bags of concrete you have. And so now let's think about what 3 is. 3, like we said earlier, is the largest. So it means it's going to have the most items in its group. And again, if we're using dots to represent our items in our groups, we can see we have 3 dots. And again, if we use our pencil analogy, we have 3 pencils. We can have 3 pens. We can have 3 erasers, 3 folders, 3 books, 3 notebooks, 3 friends. And so why exactly are numbers important? Well, numbers allow us to take seemingly unrelated concepts, like we said earlier, pencils and doors, and we can connect them by examining how many there are. What's the value of how many there are? And numbers are just that, especially the symbols for numbers, are just the representation of those values. And so let's go ahead and do a quick overview. 0 means there are nothing. There is nothing. You have nothing in the group. There are 0 items. 1 means you have a single item in the group. 2 means you have a pair of items in the group. 3 means you have, well, 3 items in the group. And so numbers connect. And we do this thing called abstracting, where we can abstract this idea, the quantity of the items in the group. And we can compare that against different things. So if we have 2 pencils and 3 pens, we have showed how these are common by examining their values. And so that's going to be it for today. And so thank you for tuning in to the first episode in arithmetic. Like I said, the first couple of episodes are going to be very, very basic, and we're going to move upwards. I personally, it feels kind of silly talking about a topic like this, but it's very important to first understand the intuition behind these concepts and to then move forward and build upon that intuition. So thank you. I hope you guys have a great night. Bye.